Thanks for making time to be part of this seminar, which Sarah Habsburg is going to lead in a minute. What we wanted to look at was the ways in which responsible tourism businesses can work in the most productive way with the OTAs. And there's clearly some concern around about that at the moment across the industry. But what we're hoping to do this afternoon is to have a look at some of the positive ways that these relationships can be made to work better for everybody. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Harold. So just a little bit about me. I am, my name's Sarah, and I know Harold from being a student of his a good 15 years ago on the Masters of Responsible Tourism Management. And I've been living in Chile, where I've been working in tourism for a good 22, 23 years before relocating to Austria just before the pandemic hit. Now, when that did hit, it spurred me to create a site which was filled with resources for hotel and hotel owners and managers to help support them in those first few months of really not being very sure about how to move forward. And that has turned now into marring one of my other passions about responsible tourism and using marketing and resilience for tourism businesses to promote the idea of responsible tourism through direct bookings and other ways to show how sustainable a business can be and to grow. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen in a second, but first of all, I just want to start this conversation by saying that this is not a new conversation. There have been frictions with the OTAs for quite a while, and some of them are worse than others, and some of them are easier to deal with. I come from a perspective of being of balance. I don't think we should jump ship on the OTAs. I also don't think that we should put all eggs in one basket by only working with them. It feels like a long time since those good old days, though, when the OTAs like Booking.com contacted us. I remember back in Chile in something like 2007, I was one of the first properties to connect. And the way that they determined who came up higher in the rankings at that time was due to your review ratings and the numbers of responses to your reviews, cancellations versus reservations, consistency of availability, etc. And that seems to have morphed right now into a little bit of an opaque world where we do feel like we're being forcibly moved towards incremental discounting and taking part in different programs that perhaps we feel that if we don't take part, we will be penalized in terms of where we come up in the rankings. So I do feel like that's a shame. I do understand why the OTAs are moving in this direction. And one of the reasons why it's increased specifically in the last couple of years, I believe, is due to competition, because the OTAs really have a big competitor there with Google. And the way that Google have moved into the travel space by increasing their increasing their space within the meta search world using Google Travel is quite incredible. And so they're reacting in a way to try to keep up appearances and keep the bookings coming in. Of course, that doesn't justify undercutting any rates or making business owners feel that they're being pushed into doing something they don't want to do. But there is a strong argument for continuing to work with OTAs. And there was some empirical research done in Belgium around 2018, 2019, which investigated the added value of OTA participation for properties and how that impacted their bottom lines. And the results showed a positive effect for hotels that were listed on Booking.com. It was only particularly Booking.com, this research. It wasn't any of the other OTAs. And interestingly, this positive association increased the smaller the property. And so you can actually then take from that having this balance is a good thing. But again, then we move into the realm of how can we best manage it. So the reality today is that people use OTAs as a research and comparison tool. We have so many people who then the first thing they do is Google the name of the hotel that they're interested in, that they've seen on the OTAs, and they see if they can book direct. And so therein lies a responsibility of ours to do what we can to make the experience they have when they land on that site the best it can possibly be. So I'm just going to share my presentation now and get going with that. Okay, I'd like to first look at a boutique hotel distribution strategy. So one of the ideal ways to look at a strategy is to look at all the pieces that fit into this way of selling. And it's a great idea to have Booking or Expedia or both, because they tend to be so high on the lists of OTAs that are selling properties throughout the world. It's also a great idea to lean on a high-end niche travel agent who can pull in people who perhaps you wouldn't have reached on your own, or that who have the opportunity to actually work very closely with the people who are interested. They have a lot of repeat customers, for example. Then, of course, local and national OTAs, because they are growing in number, and we're going to see a bit more about that later on. Local and national DMOs, like your tourist office, and anyone representing your destination. Direct bookings and own website, we've already talked about. And I've put customer loyalty and repeats in there, which is related to direct bookings, of course, but it's a strategy in its own right, because the more efficient you can become at creating customer loyalty, then the better chance you have of getting repeat customers. Okay. How do you choose which OTAs to work with? Now, of course, this is always a challenge, and it's easy to say the big ones. SiteMinder has a great report that comes out every year that shows the top 12 hotel booking revenue makers. This year it was in 21 countries and regions. And what's interesting about it is it shows newcomers and high risers, and it really allows you to work out where you should be if you're not already there, based on which booking revenue areas are pushing reservations to your location. So you can have a look here. This is an example from Portugal. And you can see there that hotel websites direct bookings is in second place, which is fantastic. And they have their 3 in the category of high risers, newcomers, and one to watch. And so this is a really good resource to work out, okay, have a look for your country and think, if I'm not already there, then it is a great place to start to get into one of these high riser sites. An example in South Africa is safarinow.com. In Austria and Germany, Kurzurlaub has become really quite well known over the last few years too. And so that's one way of trying to focus your marketing. And the next question is, how many OTAs is best? It's very easy nowadays with channel managers to go and say, okay, I'm going to have a profile everywhere. But that, as I'm sure many of you have seen, is becoming harder to manage, even though you have one channel manager that distributes your inventory to those channels. Given the size of these companies, it's very easy to think, well, I'm not going to go for any other OTAs because my rates are being distributed everywhere. It's unbelievable how many of these companies come under the names of these two groups. There is a big difference, though, between the models under which they work. And Booking.com and Expedia are agency models, which basically means that they're acting as brokers between the guest and the property. The payment happens at the hotel. And for that reason, and that reason alone, it's harder to generate price disparities. When the client has seen a price online, they come through with their reservation, which has a confirmed price, and then the payment is taken at the hotel. And I'm going to take the example of Agoda now, purely because it has been mentioned a lot recently in many countries of the world, not just one or two. As you can see there, it's a member of the Booking Holdings Group. And that means that when you are registered with Booking.com, your prices will be shared with this affiliate company, and they will be shot across the world. If anyone goes on Agoda, they can find your prices there. Now, they work as a merchant model, and that means that they have more availability or more opportunities to play with your rates, which doesn't necessarily sound very fair, but they can offer a discounted rate because they as a company have an offer happening at that time, and you can suddenly find that your rates are cheaper on that site. The reason why they can do this is because in the contract that we sign with Booking.com, for example, it does say your rates will be shared with our affiliate members. It does also say that if you as a hotel owner find price discrepancies on Agoda or Priceline, only those two, that you can take that discrepancy up with Booking.com. For all of the other websites, it says, please contact that website directly, which is a source of frustration, I do understand. But what is interesting is that they do say in their paperwork that, yes, we will deal with discrepancies from Agoda and Priceline. Now, how that works when you get through to the executive on the other side of the phone line is a different matter. I am aware of that, and that can be very frustrating too. It is unfortunately not currently possible to opt out of this service, but we will have a look as to how you can manage at least looking at it from one area of a Booking.com profile in a better way. Okay. So what can you actually do to manage your profile in a better way online? Now, the first one here, it is controversial, and it does say increase the prices for OTAs via your channel manager. Now, I would only suggest doing this, and I've seen it tested and worked, that when you have had complaints and problems of finding rates, for example, 5%, 6%, 4.5%, kind of an odd percent higher on a site like Agoda, and you've complained and you've tried to find out the reason, and then nothing has happened, then you have to take action. And actions such as closing your profile on Booking.com, it shouldn't have to be like that. So if you were to create a separate rate plan for Booking.com on your on your channel manager, then put those rates out there and increase 6%, for example. And then if Booking.com come back to you and say, why have you done this? Then you can show them all the conversations that you previously had and say, this is why I've done this, because I can't get to the bottom of this and I don't think it's okay. And so while it may sound as if we're playing a game, it is a way to get around the fact that you have a legitimate reason to complain about rates being sold cheaper, but you're not getting anywhere with complaining about it. So it is one thing that you can do. The second one is to change your Genius rate settings. Now, I'm talking here specifically about Booking.com. There's an argument about whether you should participate in Genius, and I will go over that in a second. But this is something that not a lot of people know. Booking.com rolled out the ability to share your Genius rates across all channels. Now, that is something that they may or may not have sent in an email. It could well have just been updated in an online contract. It certainly wasn't something that was sent individually to hotel owners. There are two ways to deal with this. The first thing is to go into the extranet and check here under Opportunities, Genius Partner Program, Manage Your Audience, as you can see on the screen. And the first stage is to limit the audience. You can see there that on the left, the default is active. So this has happened within the property without me activating that I want my 10% discount, the standard Genius discount, to be available to anyone with a Booking.com account. So it used to be, as you can see on the right top box, that it's available to anyone who's completed 2 or more stays on Booking.com within 2 years. Now, again, that's hardly extremely exclusive, but still, they have made a change there. And so you can go in here and take ownership and close that off by checking the limited audience box. And then the second section underneath, you can see there that it's default activated to rate sharing across different channels. And that means that Booking.com is sharing your Genius rate on all their affiliate sites, which then gives them the extra opportunity to take a Genius rate and then discount according to any discounts that they may have available or any promos that they're running. So you can close that off by clicking on the box to the bottom right, rate sharing on Booking.com only. And then, of course, asking yourself the question, do you need Genius at all? So one of the biggest questions I get is, but every time I talk to my executive about this, they show me these really great reports, and I don't think I can lose 75% of my bookings if you look at that report there on the screen. Is there any way of knowing how many of these Genius bookers would have booked full rate had it not been for having the Genius? Right now, of course, they don't share that information. And so this is another question that you can ask yourself, you know, is it worth it? What's the actual cost of that room to you? And I'm sure that's an exercise that most hotel owners do because it's super important, but is it worth it? Also, the exclusivity area we were just talking about, you know, for me, for someone who stayed just twice in 2 years in a booking.com hotel, they get 10% discount. It feels not that exclusive, really. Even the discount of 15% for the Genius level 2, again, it's not hugely exclusive. So I'm seeing Genius being offered across the board now, and it seems to me to have lost its exclusivity completely. And I don't actually think that's doing booking.com any favors, but yeah, that's another conversation. The other thing is a restricted blackout. I argued for a long time to have a longer blackout range for Genius, purely because in the high seasons when I was working, I didn't want to have the Genius available for the whole period of my summer season. That should have been my prerogative, but there are only 30 days maximum you can restrict. And so that, again, was another reason for considering whether that's enough for you to not be offering this rate. One other thing that is often not discussed is that the Genius rate can be offered to corporate clients by booking.com. And so if you are doing a quote for a group, and they're being offered a 20% discount by you, and they go online and then they themselves are a Genius member, then they could stack up Genius plus a mobile discount and actually get a better rate on booking.com than the one that you think is great that you're offering them for their discounted group booking. So again, it's another issue. And I just mentioned the stacking with mobile discounts. Not all discounts on booking.com do stack, but the mobile plus Genius do. And so that means suddenly you can see that you can offer up to 30% discount before tax and commission. And that's something that it's a choice, but it begins with awareness of knowing that that's possible. Okay. So the other one is to check if you're in online payment model and risk-free reservations. Again, I'm talking specifically about booking.com. It's the one that I deal with a lot. It is one of the biggest, and therefore I'm talking specifically about these right now. The online payment model has been around for some time, and it's technically a merchant model that booking.com offered quite a long time ago when some hotels didn't have their own booking engines and didn't want to deal with payments. It's resurfaced a little over the pandemic, and some hotels have opted into it. Some hotels are not sure if they're opted into that option. And again, that because it's a merchant model allows booking.com to have access to play a little more with the rates. Risk-free reservation sounds great to a certain extent because booking.com commit to replacing your room or finding a guest to fill your room if you have a cancellation. The issue with this is that it applies to your non-refundable rates. That's not quite made clear if you sign up to the risk-free reservations, but it kind of makes your non-refundable rates completely irrelevant if they are available to be cancelled and then booking.com say they will find someone else. You can only be in risk-free reservations if you're in the online payment model. So you can check on that only by contacting your executive. Preferred Plus, this is again a new program. There always was a preferred level for a partner level where your commission in South America, it was 17%. I know it does change according to what geographical area you were in. The lowest was 14 and then Preferred Plus, Preferred is 17 and Preferred Plus is an extra 5%. So that makes it 22% commission. Now, I've done quite a lot of testing on this to find out that if being a Preferred Plus property really does get you higher up to justify that extra 5% commission. And I find regularly that there aren't enough examples where that Preferred Plus hotel is still coming up top, which tells me that there are more factors within the algorithm that supersede it. And that it's not necessarily based on the price that you're paying in commissions. one of the downsides of the Preferred Plus also is that Booking.com give credit to any guest that books a Preferred Plus hotel, and so they're keeping them on the site. So essentially, your extra commission is paying credit in a roundabout way to a client to keep them on the Booking.com site, because that credit can be used against another stay in the future on Booking.com. Okay, and so these ones are more relevant, more general now. Reducing your own inventory on the OTAs just to your standard rooms is also an option to take more control, because your profit is higher on your higher price rooms. So if you do a great job of getting people over to your site in ways that we're going to talk about later, you can actually just list your standard rooms on Booking.com and any OTA, and then you work hard to get people over to be able to sell your upsells or your higher price rooms. So that's one way of keeping a visibility on all the OTAs, but not giving away all of your higher priced rooms. Check on the tax as shown. Again, this is the basic comment, but I do see a lot that taxes should not be included in the rates, because the OTAs do not include taxes. So they're always going to show up lower if you have your taxes included. And reviewing the rates on your channel manager. Again, this sounds really, really basic. And so I made it a weekly job to spend 20, 25 minutes just going into the channel manager and checking the availability and rates, which I know kind of feels like that's not what a channel manager is for. You want to automate it, but it is one way of feeling like you have control, because you really can see. One of the problems I had with this was not for rates that were coming up over the next week or two. It was for the rates in the high season 7 months in advance. I programmed them all, and then somehow they easily seem to get overridden or tripped, or something changed in the system. And that's something that I had to regularly overhaul and take a look at. So yeah, again, of course, it depends what sort of channel manager you're using, but I do recommend going and having a look at them regularly. And the other one is to check your mobile rates using a VPN. There's a really easy way to do this, and I can show you right here. This is a property that I looked at on my desktop, and it shows this price in euros. I was looking at that from Austria, so great, I see this price in euros. And then I activated a VPN on my desktop. I could have done it on my phone, but I wanted to see them side by side. And just by clicking that little button top right that you can see in the screen, I could see that there is effectively a mobile only price listed on the mobile version. And so it's a quick way of checking, because you can see them side by side. You can do this only on the opera.com browser. And all you have to do is activate the VPN and then change what you are seeing on screen from a desktop to a mobile. So that's a really efficient and effective way to just quickly do a check on your rooms in different seasons and for different dates. So having talked about this, and we've kind of said a lot of things that the OTAs we think are not doing great, and ways of kind of fighting the good fight. But there is an argument that whatever we decide to do, it's our choice, right? We can stay with these OTAs or we can leave. We could close them down. One way to get proactive about this is to focus on direct bookings. It helps the balance, and it also helps you feel more confident and in control. This quote you can see on the screen now is from SiteMinder's report, the one I mentioned earlier that we saw the example from Portugal. And this is really great news. In 12 markets, direct bookings are up as the second top producer, up from 5 in 2020 and just 2 in 2019. Now that's a huge increase, and it's really, really motivating, and showing also the way that consumers are moving towards doing exactly what we said right at the beginning, using the OTAs as a comparison tool and then looking towards moving straight to the website. It does also coincide with the way that Google is increasing their listings for hotels on Google Travel, on Google Search. They're making it easier for customers to book to click straight through to the website. So I am pretty sure that has a lot to do with it too. So increasing direct booking starts, of course, with a seamless booking engine and optimized customer experience. I talk about this a lot, and I'm surprised how many people have said, oh, I never thought to look at my site as if I'm a customer. And it sounds a bit silly, really, because you would think that it's something that we do every time we look at our sites, but really kind of cleaning your head from being that hotel manager or owner and sitting down and imagining you've never seen this property before. What's that gut reaction you get when you click onto it? Are you engaged? Is there a unique value proposition? Are you talking to your audience in the right way and giving them what they want? So the booking engine is a given. If you want to take bookings online, there is no other way to do it now than to have one. So I won't go into them that in more detail. But I will just give an example that I have 2 small kids, and when I see something immediately on a hotel website that makes me feel like they get me, and this actually happened, that I saw something that said, your check-in at this hotel, and something along these lines, will be the most relaxed you've ever had. And that got me, because check-in is always the worst, right? They're tugging at your sleeves. And they then showed a picture of a discovery tank in reception. For me, that was the most unique value they could give me, because if it meant I can check into a hotel, my kids just go look in a discovery tank a meter away from me, then they've got my booking. That got me, as opposed to looking at another one that couldn't do that. They got my attention. So, it's those sort of things I'm talking about. Of course, website optimization is a part of this, but understanding how Google ranks your site is super important. Google has now a 92% market share, and so it is foolish to not take some time to look at how Google ranks your site. And it's not just about mobile friendliness and page loading speed, which of course are important, but specifically for hotels, Google penalizes hotels who have not taken the time to create unique URLs for their translated pages. And a lot of hotels have translated pages to appeal to the international market, and often that's something that's overlooked. And so that's something to take a look at and read up on. Connecting to Google Hotels free booking listings, it's free, as it says there. It is such an important thing to do right now. It's the first time ever that an independent hotel can show up in the organic listings alongside the OTAs with a direct link straight through to your website. It can be done through your channel manager. Most channel managers have this available right now. And it just means that competing just got easier. And so this has only been available since, towards the end of last year. And it's so efficient to do it. The way that they actually then rank the hotels to show up within these hotel booking listings is a much more complex story, but it revolves around 4 areas. And so getting in on that competition is easier, and it really, really is important to get listed on their free booking listings. Understanding your target audience. I know this is basic, I do know, but it is, again, something that's overlooked and tied very much into content creation. Detecting those pain points, the objections, because objections is such a key part of any decision-making process to buy. We always find a reason not to go to that place, or not to spend that money, or not to do that. So if you can really understand those objections of your audience, then you have a better chance at actually creating content and answering the questions that they have, sometimes even the ones they don't know they have, on your website and on any content that you put out there. So creating this engaging content consistently is also a way for Google to rank you higher. They simply won't rank websites that are bereft of engaging content or fresh content. So first of all, they need the fresh content, they need a consistency of new content, and then they also want to understand easily what you're about. And so keyword research, it's difficult. And I have heard so many times, my keyword is hotel. How can I stand out? That's just so difficult to do. But there is a fresh perspective. There is a different way to look at it. And that's once you understand that Google rank properties based on context that they can pull out of that content, then it makes it easier to group your keywords, to give Google the understanding that they can get a good picture of what you're about. So if you mention certain words repetitively, but not so that it sounds stuffed. Lakeside, poolside, beach, all these kind of words that give your hotel context, then Google really do work well with that. So it's called semantic latent indexing, and you can Google that and have another look at what it means and how you can incorporate it. Also, one other thing there is that right now we need to be embracing voice assistant. There's a statistic, I think it's 65% of 25 to 49-year-olds use voice assistant every single day. That's a lot of people. And so the way we talk is very different to the way that we write. So what you will say into a Google Voice or any voice assistant query is very different to how you would write it. And most of those queries are triggered by a certain set of keywords. And so once you have that knowledge too, then you begin to incorporate more of those into your content, and you can show up higher on those organic voice search queries too. Customer loyalty, steal the OTAs model. Look at what they're doing. It's working for them. They're getting people to stay on their sites. Best rate guaranteed. If you have that on your website, then of course you commit to matching any rate that is found, but still is probably better than having somebody look at your site, then find someone somewhere else €2 differently or €10 differently and booking through them, because you will probably pay commission, almost always pay commission on that other booking. Think about gated member only offers, which again is going to take me into a realm of talking about email marketing, which I won't go into now. But if you do have a gated member only offer, then you do get people to sign up to that, which means that you can then begin to nurture them through an ongoing email marketing strategy, which is a whole other conversation. And the last one is to celebrate those direct bookings. This is not only in your best interest, but I also believe it's an inherent responsibility we have as business owners to educate the customers about what it really means to you to have received that direct booking. It's so very easy to just not acknowledge it or to not thank the person for it. And one way that I've tried and tested in properties that I've managed is such a simple idea to create a sign that just says, thank you very much for your direct booking. You'll find a gift to show our appreciation in your room. And I actually went a step further and framed this. And I always had it right next to my elbow and uncomfortably bumped into it whenever I was checking in someone who booked through an OTA. I drew their attention to it, and you could visibly see this, I've missed out on something because I booked through an OTA. And often when the person who has booked direct, they are then engaged and motivated to book again direct in the future, because they think, yeah, I've got something for free. And they don't necessarily need to understand that is because you don't have to pay commission somewhere else, therefore. But what you can do is take it another step further and say, use a product from the local community. Explain that the fact they booked direct has helped you support someone in your community to continue with the handicrafts or whatever it is, and you can begin to weave a story out of that. So not only is it super important to say thank you, but it also begins to work in the same direction as this general change of consciousness that we've got going on about consumers right now, who are becoming more aware of the benefit of doing it this way. And so that's a really, really great thing to do, not just to check people in and not acknowledge it, but really make a deal out of the fact that you appreciate what they've done. So I'm at the end now. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you would like to. And there is a free 15-minute webinar that I did about Google for hotels available at that link. So thank you for listening.
Sarah, thanks for that. Can I take the first question,
Of course.
if I may? I was very intrigued by the point you were making at the end there. How does that feed through into the referrals and recommendations? Is there any evidence that encourages people to, when they recommend you to others, to suggest that they book direct? Is there any research been done on that?
Well, research that I've read about, I don't know, I couldn't say, but in my own experience, I have heard so often that people talk about the quality of the value added that they got by this extra that they received. So in the property that I was managing, we did use a product from the local community that were unique to where we were. And people were so astounded by them. They were flowers made out of shaved wood, and beautifully colored, and they look so real, and people were desperate to take them home. And when they got home, then they would often share this story. So, you know, that it's drops in the ocean. It's these small things. That's all it is. So yes, in my own research, it works in that way, that people talk about it because they remember that value. And again, it's about value, giving value to people, and helping them understand that they gave you value, so you're giving it back to them.
Who's got the next question? Simon, go ahead. You need to unmute. Yeah.
I'm actually going to ask a few questions. You mentioned a discovery tank.
Mm-hmm.
What is that, Sarah? Excuse my ignorance.
No problem at all. It was a big fish tank that didn't have too many fish in it. It had lots of other alive things in the bottom. And the children were absolutely fascinated. In fact, they were there for hours every day because there were so many things that they had missed before. And it was just such a unique thing for that hotel to do. And it was so simple. So simple. I've seen other hotels that put steps at the side of reception with colored numbers on them, 1, 2, 3 or something, just so that the children can participate in that check-in. And so it doesn't have to be something that shakes the world. It just has to be something that completely appeals to that customer that you have, that makes them say, yeah, this is going to make my life easier.
Then maybe a little more on topic kind of question, although I think that's such a great idea. Are we going to see a time, do you think, when Google, who's already doing the hotel free listings booking, well, you can read free listings, and I think you said they were at, I think 92% market share. Are they going to just, because of pure economics, I suppose, and capitalism, just morph into an OTA themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question. To a certain extent, they do already do it with Book on Google. Now, it is more popular in the United States, and it's available for hotels who want to work with a customer who has Google Pay as a wallet. This is why it's more common in the US, because more people pay with Google Pay, and you can actually go all the way through the process to pay Google for your hotel stay, and then they pay the hotel. So it actually does already exist. They don't seem to be moving towards that in Europe, purely because I don't think they want the hassle of dealing with the individual hotels. And so, you know, I believe that they're using this Book on Google as a test. It's been around for a while, actually, but I believe they're using that to see how it works and how many more resources they need as a company to deal with the customer service side of it. And by the customer service, I mean the property owners. And so there is an argument that they will go in that direction in the far future. But to be honest, I don't think that they will turn into that within the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, sorry, and I've got a couple more questions.
You go ahead, Simon. Others will get there.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I stayed at a B&B, I suppose it was, in the north of England on a marketing trip, and I noticed on their website that they expressly asked people to book directly and not with. They named a few of the OTAs. So I'm just wondering, actually, do the OTAs check that sort of thing? I'm a little bit controversial, of course, but
well. To be honest, if they found that on your website, what could they really do if you maintain a healthy profile with them? What they can do, like when I mentioned about setting up a different rate for them, I would only suggest that that's done if you've been having consistent problems that they haven't solved, as a way to kind of show your frustration. But they can't really do an awful lot if they see that you're saying book direct, other than say, please don't say that. You know, they do plenty of advertising for us. And they do talk all the time about, we're doing such a great thing because we're showing your rates across all our affiliate members, and this is a great thing for you. And so just by you saying, I think it's a matter of reframing it and saying, please book direct because we support this in our local community. And we would perhaps donate 2% or 5% of the extra profit to this community or to this project. And I think that gives you less guilt about doing it perhaps, and also works both ways. And so that's the way I would look at that.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thanks. And then the last one I just wanted to ask you was a little bit about loyalty programs for guests.
Mm-hmm.
We were considering something we haven't implemented yet, but a loyalty program that can actually reward a guest before they even arrive, mm-hmm. where they can refer with their name or code to a friend to say, oh, we're going to this great lodge next weekend. And if you use my name, BLA001, then you can actually get a discount code. And the discount goes both ways. It goes to the person who gives the code out, me, who's a future customer arriving next weekend, and the customer that's the referral. You can both get a benefit off that. It's just a way that we were considering trying to build a loyalty program. It isn't always only after the fact.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea, because you actually then get them to pass that on to their friend, and you never know, they might decide to come join the whole weekend as well. And yeah, it is a really good idea. One way also that you can give people something in advance is to give them credit to use during their stay. So it doesn't always have to be discounts. Sometimes people don't see the value in discounts, even though it's a great thing on paper because it looks like you're saving money. There is so much more, I think, personally, I think it shows more, it shows more passion about what you're doing from the owners if you take the time to choose something that actually adds more value. And so if you give them credit for a certain experience within your hotel, then the likelihood that they take you up on that, they're taking it as a great suggestion from you. But also if you choose the right experience, then they may well spend more doing that experience and leaving more money in situ, whether that's an experience outside of your hotel within your community, or whether it's something on site like a massage where they can have an added upgrade, or they buy something in conjunction. And so I like your idea a lot. I think that's a great idea, especially about recommending to friends. But also consider not just discounts, but also, you know, extra experiences that you can give as a credit. But always thinking in mind, what is there something that they can add on to this that will leave more money in my hotel, without sounding mercenary about it. It's a business. That's just what it's all about. But if you're giving value, people don't mind. And so, yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay.
Who's next? Sarah, it sounds as though you've done such a good presentation. Ah, Emily.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, when we have discussions about OTAs and sort of, should I work with them or shouldn't I? Or, you know, ideally, everybody wants direct bookings. And one of the things that I've noticed personally traveling in South Africa is that the risk, there tends to be this issue, not just with OTAs, but also with DMCs, that the lodge owner or the property owner has a distance to the actual customer. And particularly in a trip in South Africa, this can sort of end up becoming quite complicated, where the owner of the property doesn't really know when or what time the people are coming. And I had a situation 3 years ago in the Manuleti where a Spanish couple, very late in the afternoon, in their teeny tiny rental car with their booking.com app open in a reserve where very few vehicles actually would be able to bump into them in the first place, were on basically looking for their lodge that they had booked online, and they spoke limited English, and they didn't understand that they were in a big 5 area, and that under no circumstances should they get out of the vehicle. And this sort of got me thinking about, you know, the suitability of booking.com as a channel for properties that are in sort of wilderness areas or conservation areas, where ideally you have, as an owner, much more of a relationship already before the guest actually comes to you, because of logistics and timing, you know, all that kind of thing. I don't know if anybody else has got any experiences with this or ideas about this, because my initial reaction was, you know, properties like that shouldn't be able to list on booking.com, because imagine if something goes wrong, could be a disaster.
No, it's an interesting point. I mean, again, that goes back to the kind of communication that the lodge has. Now, I don't want to push it all onto the lodge themselves, but there are certain stipulations that you can publish even on your OTA listings, which say, you know, we will only accept arrivals between such and such a time, or, you know, there are things that you can do to communicate with those customers before they arrive. But yeah, it's a very good argument to look in.
They had no idea that they were going into a Big Five area. Seriously, they were completely unprepared. And one of the things also, the problem was that the name of the lodge on the app was different to what is used in the actual conservation area. So the guide on the vehicle was saying that lodge is not here. We don't have that lodge. Okay. So then they ended up phoning up all the lodges in the area to say, "Are you expecting 2 Spanish people?"
Wow, that does sound.
And it came right in the end, but they were lucky to bump into us, because it's a very Manualeti there's not a lot of people driving around.
Right.
There's not a lot of properties there.
Ultimately, to avoid those kind of problems, I guess the only answer is to focus more on OTAs like the smaller ones, like the Survive Now, or even build better and stronger relationships with higher end niche agencies and operators. You know, it is all about balance, like we said right at the beginning. And if you do choose to list on booking.com, then those kind of things are going to happen. It would be interesting to know whether that's one out of, you know, how often that kind of situation where someone's actually driven into a part where they shouldn't be has actually occurred. But yeah, there is an argument there that certain properties shouldn't be listing if they can't or can't communicate well enough the information with the customer, or the customer has no communication with the lodge about what time they're arriving, or what day, or, you know, where they're coming from, or how they're getting there. I assumed that most properties that are in reserves like that would include transfers. Now, I might be completely wrong there.
Well, in South Africa, you self-drive.
There are lots of self-drives, okay, so lots of people are coming in cars, okay.
Yeah.
Who's next for the question? Simon, so you again.
Yeah, sorry, man, I don't mean to be hogging. And I see Glyn's hands up as well, so I'll be quick, Glyn. Just a quick question, Sarah, about rate parity. I know it's been outlawed in some countries, South Africa not. Where do we stand on that, and what do you think the future is going to be for us with rate parity?
I think, given the way that it's so quickly become very not so much talked about anymore in Europe, in South America, it's not in the clauses anymore. It's not in the contracts anymore. And this is because the OTAs just know that they've been taken to court in various countries about it. It's not going to continue, I believe. I wasn't aware that it still is in the contracts in South Africa, actually. I wonder if for new properties signing up today, it would be, because it could be a hang from before. Previous ones, original ones that have been listed for a while. I don't know. I would have to look more into that to be able to say. But I believe that the price parity clauses are going across the world.
Thanks.
Glyn, you had your hand up at one point.
I did indeed, Harold. I've got a few comments to make, I guess. And let me start with talking about the whole thing of the OTAs, and from the perspective of what I would regard as responsible tourism, and therefore the responsible aspects of it. Just as one example, one of the OTAs that we work with charges commission, as do all of the others, and they charge commission in our case, on what are VAT inclusive prices. So we are paying a commission to them on a VAT inclusive price, and then they're adding VAT to the commission. So they're double dipping on the commission. Now, that for me is, one can say, well, if you agree to a particular percentage as a commission, that's fine, because that's your decision to do that. But for them to actually use your pricing to generate additional income for themselves, and not to recognize or accept that we are, in our case, a VAT registered business, and therefore apply their commission to our VAT exclusive price, it's just immoral. So there's a morality issue that sometimes I question with some of the way in which these things are done. And yet they're the same people who will very happily talk about sustainability and this and that and how important that is to them, but they won't address that very fundamental shortfall or shortcoming in what they do. So that's one of the things. The other is this issue of the way in which they go about either discounting their prices or disclosing prices. I was interested reading Sarah's blog earlier to see one of the her saying that one of the OTAs reflects a VAT exclusive price, which is then immediately will make it cheaper than your price. Now, the customer only discovers that at a later stage, when they're already well down the sort of the process of booking their accommodation. It's like Airbnb does with their adding a cleaning fee at the end and things like that. Again, I think it's just from a morality point of view, I think it's wrong that they're doing that, because what they're doing is not comparing apples with apples. They're being devious in the way in which they are going about making these comparisons. And I think that's morally, for me, it's an unacceptable process. And the third point I want to make is that we are all of those of us on this panel that are involved in accommodation in one way or another, Marco, Simon, or ourselves, we're all small businesses. We all have small properties or a limited number of beds that we have to work with. We don't employ huge numbers of people, and yet we have to spend a fortune on monitoring the antics of the OTAs, because they are antics, the way they keep moving the goalposts, putting pressure on you to accept their pricing or accept this genius or accept this new way that they're going to drive business to your property, and the pressure they put on you by threatening you that if you don't accept this, then you are going to be in trouble. Now, I know this session wasn't intended to be an OTA bashing session, and I know but the mere fact that you've got to find ways around doing this in itself is immoral. And I know it costs us a fortune. We now are in a position where our reservation staff every single day, 3 times a day, are checking our prices on the OTAs. And last week, I got a telephone call to say that we'd had, because these are the ramifications, we'd had a call from a tour operator here in South Africa who is dealing with a Dutch tour operator. The Dutch tour operator is a new client for them, the South African client, so they're desperate to retain their work. And the Dutch tour operator wrote and said their client in Holland has checked the itinerary, and there's our lodge in the Kgalagadi is sort of a key aspect of their itinerary, and they went on, and it's probably the most expensive part of the itinerary, and they went on to onto Google, and they checked and discovered that somewhere there was a price that was cheaper than what the OTA was offering, what the tour operator, or they believed the tour operator was offering, because they saw what was our price and they saw what was this other price. So they made the assumption that the tour operator was being charged our price, and it was 500 Rand more expensive or something like that than the cheapest price they could find on the OTA. So they made the assumption that that was what they were getting charged, and they kicked up such a stink about it, threatened to take their business away if it wasn't adjusted. And we ended up having to give an additional 9% discount just to keep the tour operator in South Africa happy, in order to keep the tour operator in Holland happy, in order to keep the client in Holland happy, and all because they did this comparison of what was probably not a fair comparison of the rate in the first place. But it got all emotional, and so our staff just said, we've got to keep the client happy, so we gave in and gave away the discount. So it's that kind of thing that I think from a responsible tourism point of view has to be addressed. Yes, we can work around these things and we can do all sorts of things, but we just are seeing too many of these. And when you contact the OTAs, very often you're talking to a call center, and very often that call center starts out sort of in an amenable discussion, but when the water gets a little bit hot for them, they suddenly can't understand your English, or they can't understand this, or they can't understand that, and then the conversation ends with the phone being put down. And I could go on for hours with various examples of this. We've had an incident when a few months ago now, in our guest house, where a client arrived here with a booking that had come, in our case, through Knightsbridge. My wife had received the booking. It was at whatever our rack rate was, and the client arrived here. They had a booking sheet that came from booking.com, but they had booked through, the booking was through hotel beds, and the end result of it was that what Jill got was actually 45% or thereabouts of what the Knightsbridge booking said she should get. And when she queried this, it turned out that it was, I don't know if it was Agoda or whoever it was, but whoever it was a client, was one of the partner of Hotel Beds, and they then, Hotel Beds had a particular rate with Jill, and Hotel Beds had then given Agoda that rate, and everybody was then charging their commissions on the deal. So the end result was you've done a deal with Hotel Beds, but you actually discover that your deal isn't with Hotel Beds. Your deal is with Hotel Beds and however many other people. Now, maybe they say so at some point, but they're not open about it. And so you can't, again, I know, speaking for myself, and I'm sure for Simon and Marco, we run businesses that are in remote rural areas that are owned by communities in many instances, or we support communities in those areas. We cannot run our properties for 45% of the price we charge and allow other people to basically prostitute our properties for us. We really can't, because we have to pay the costs of running the properties. We have to pay the staff. We have to pay the food that goes to feeding our clients. We have to pay for the vehicle that transfers them and the fuel that goes into them and the power and everything else. And they sit in an office somewhere with some technology, and yes, maybe they spend a lot of money on paying people hugely inflated prices, while our staff go without salaries, particularly now through COVID. And at the same time, they just get away with it. It's as if though it doesn't matter to them. And none of them, when they were just refunding deposits and from people at the time of COVID, not any of them said, no, hang on a second, we understand your predicament. They were, if you didn't pay the money back, they threatened to sue you. So I think there's a relationship issue that I think needs to be dealt with at a different level, because otherwise it's just going to go pear-shaped. Now, at the end of it, I suppose we can make a decision and say, well, why use them? And we don't have to, we're not forced to. But it is a visibility issue as well. You know, because of their power, they've commandeered the top spots everywhere. And so how will people ever find your property? As Harold said at the beginning of this, there are people who use them to find a place to stay, and then some people will book directly, others won't. But it is about the visibility as well. So I know it's a catch-22. It's not an easy question to answer, but I do think that there's got to be somewhere in this whole thing, there's got to be some morality that is brought to bear amongst the OTAs, because otherwise they just don't care.
Sarah, before you, Glenn, if I may, Sarah, before you answer that, because I think it is clearly an extraordinarily important question. I'm aware of a number of areas which are beginning to talk about setting up. There have been some failures, but there are places which are beginning to talk about setting up local booking networks. It's begun to happen to some extent in national parks, for example. Barcelona is talking about doing it. And then, of course, there are the specialist sites like responsibletravel.com. I mean, maybe in answering Glyn's point, it's worth reflecting on whether there are other models which may emerge or are emerging at the moment, which begin to answer some of those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything that Glyn said is absolutely right. And it does mirror the experience of a lot of property owners across the world. And you are absolutely right with the catch-22 situation. It is a choice. There is a very, very deep question there. Would my property survive without this profile of just one or many of the OTAs? We all want to build more resilient businesses and more sustainable futures. And one way to do that is to, of course, increase direct bookings, as we've seen. And so there can be nothing against moving in that direction. But I think the only way that we can maintain visibility, if we were to reduce working with the OTAs, is to improve the general search engine optimization that our business has. Because as we've already seen, the Google with 92% share, they're moving in a direction which is giving indications that they're more sustainable. I don't want to say sustainable as a company, but they're certainly showing that they are more caring of their impact as a company in general, because it's not just that they've allowed now the eco-certified badges to be attached to properties on Google. They've also rolled out that you can choose your car journey with the best carbon footprint in the US. You can choose flights with according to carbon footprints. They're also pushing, when you Google for a washing machine, they're pushing forward the ones that are more efficient at the top of the ratings, and it's not just about price anymore. And they also have a very solid sustainability policy about their own impact as a company. And so I have a feeling that that is somewhere that they're trying to drive consumer awareness in the right way, as we all do. And so by increasing visibility on a platform like that is not visibly trying to get our money. Now, one of the reasons, there is an argument that by having free hotel booking listings, they are hoping that we will invest in hotel ads, because we're actually seeing how it works and how efficient it can be. And we can see that, oh, we're placed there, but if we paid, we could be placed here. And so, of course, there's a business argument. They're a very, very efficient machine. And so that's one strategy I believe we have to move into. I also think the local businesses, the local DMOs, the local online OTAs, like Harold just mentioned, they are going to grow in strength, but it is to do with a consumer awareness. And so that goes back to what I said earlier about us having an inherent responsibility in this, that it would be very easy to just say, you know, we're so tired of this, we're not going to work with them anymore. And I think we might get there sooner than we think. But I think jumping ship right now could be detrimental to our businesses. But I believe that it's a two-way balance. We need to do some work in other areas to really improve our visibility online, to be able to reach a stage where we can say, okay, we think we can survive without them now. And one of the interim ways to do that, to fight that fight, because without it's a question that I can't answer as to what do we do to stop them undercutting, by your example, Glyn, of 45% discount there that was found online. That is something that's way beyond the control of most people, and it's happening behind the scenes, and it is absolutely immoral and unacceptable. Now, how we address that can only be by keeping lists and lists of all the communication and these things that have happened, which is a pain and isn't what you want to be doing as a business owner. But then when you do create your own rate for booking.com or for whatever OTA that it was, and they say to you, why are you listing on booking.com 30% more than on other places? You can say, well, this is why I can't survive with these kind of discounts. And that's probably when the conversations are going to start to open up, and that's when it's going to escalate to higher echelons within the company itself. As for their own sustainability moves, then booking.com did release the ability for a hotel to be able to list themselves as being more sustainable with your sustainable actions, etc. They're moving in that direction too. They're doing what they can. It's still not part of the filter, which is something I would like to see. Now, that does not excuse them at all for some of the immoral price undercutting that's going on. And so ultimately, it is a decision on the backs of the hotel owners. And I think that the way to go forward is to start to put pressure on by putting those prices up. And when they argue back, you just say, well, this is why. This is why. Look at this. Look at this list of all these times this has happened.
Who else? Thanks, Gwyn. Nobody else want to ask? Marco, are you happy? All right,
Yeah,
happy. Is there anything you want to ask?
I just wanted to recap on all the information that we heard again. So I'm just wondering where we'll can we access your presentation somewhere?
We're going to put this up. I should be blogging next week on the WTM Africa site, Marco.
Okay.
So it will be publicly available. That's why I was saying very carefully. No, we did say we call it to a halt at about an hour, so we're there. If I could, thank you, Sarah, very much for that presentation and
Yeah, thank
for
you.
you taking part in this. Thanks, everybody.